Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Study Various Majors in the United States series. Today, we will focus on study public policy in the United States. My name is Hani, and I am the Education USA advisor in the Fulbright Commission. And my special guest today, who is going to talk about public policy, is Rachel, who is a Fulbright grantee, and she's currently teaching English at Czech High School in Hranice, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Welcome, Rachel, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to Hani and that everyone gets to hear it. And yeah, feel free to ask me more questions at the
Sure.
end. Okay. So we'll be talking about studying public policy. The first question obviously is, what is public policy? It's it might be a new term for some of you. It certainly was for me. I definitely we'll get more into this later, but I didn't know that I wanted to study public policy. I didn't know what I wanted to study at all. But obviously throughout my undergrad experience, I learned a lot more about what public policy is. So it was initially appealing to me because it's kind of a combination of a lot of different humanities and social science fields that I was interested in. So I think what's nice about public policy is that it's pretty flexible. It can be what you want to make it. So you have to kind of have a general understanding of a few different core fields, including history, politics, economics, some sociology, and a few others mixing in there. But the idea is that you can kind of focus on whichever one of those or multiple of those that you want to. I think the thing that really ties it all together is that you're doing real world problem solving. So what the actual definition of what a public policy is different kinds of laws, programs, or guidelines that are often created by the government or other sorts of governing bodies like international organizations. Private organizations also have their own set of policies or, again, just like guidelines. But the reason public policy specifically is focused on the public realm. So government more than, and like kind of programs that can be accessed by everyone, by the general public, rather than just private organizations. So yeah. Next slide. I think this major can be really appealing to a lot of different kinds of people with a lot of different interests. But I would say it's particularly a good fit for people who, like I mentioned, are interested in the humanities and social sciences, but are having some trouble deciding which one. So I would say if you are super interested in history, you should just go ahead and be a history major. But if you like history and economics, which seem pretty different from each other, then public policy is a good way to kind of combine those interests. I think you also have to really enjoy working with other people because developing these policies, writing these policies requires a lot of teamwork and collaboration. It's all about thinking how policies will affect people and to kind of put policies in motion, it requires a lot of teamwork. So you have to be willing to do that. Even I think we'll talk more about this at the end in terms of what you can do with a public policy degree, but you can go on to do a lot of different things. You don't have to be one of the people actually writing policies, but I think even just studying public policy, it means that in a lot of your classes and coursework, you'll have to be working with other people. And as I mentioned, it requires a lot of problem solving skills. So I think if you think of yourself as being good at that, then it might be a good fit for you. It also is very reading and writing heavy. So you have to do a lot of research and reading about different policies and studies of how programs have been effective or not effective, and then kind of analyzing all that information and coming to your own conclusions. So I would say you have to make sure that you enjoy reading and also writing kind of clear and concise language. Yes, lots of time spent on those. And I'd say the last thing that was really appealing about this major for me is that you should care about current events and social issues, because that kind of to its core is what policies are about. They're created to address social issues, and especially they are often you're often thinking about how to create new policies or change policies in response to certain current events or things that are going on in the world. So you definitely have to be tuned in to what's going on in the world. So if you're not really a person who cares much about what's going on in the news, it might not be as interesting, or you might be a little lost in terms of your
It seems to me that you need a little bit of everything. Like you have to be communicative, problem solving, working in a team, reading, writing, analyzing, and then like making sure you know what's going on. That's a lot, you know, like what what a student were you at high school that you were like, okay, I'm checking all these boxes, let's apply to public policy. Like I was undecided. Like, you know, when I was studying at high school, I didn't know what to do. So I was interested in humanities. I wouldn't mind, you know, social sciences, but never ever it occurred to me that there is something called public policy that I could dive into. So what, maybe because I was not that all about the current events and social issues. Like I see it, but I don't really seek it out. But who were you, you know, like that you would
Yes,
go this
great
route?
question. I guess that's kind of a good description of who I was. Like I was just kind of all over the place and interested in lots of different things and had absolutely no idea what I wanted to study. I wasn't even sure, you know, I was also really interested in biology and health. And I ended up doing a lot of coursework in health policy. So you can even if you have interests outside of the humanities and social sciences, more in the hard sciences, you can still find a way to fit those in. So yeah, it is kind of, you have to be, it's more of a generalist major. So you have to kind of have a general knowledge in a lot of different things, but you don't have to be an expert in one specific thing, which I think was really appealing to me. I would say I grew up really interested in social issues because I grew up in a community that I kind of disagreed with a lot of my peers about social issues. So I think that's what made me, like, kind of drew me to focusing more on that in my studies. But I wouldn't say I really pursued that in high school. That I was kind of just in high school, especially in US high schools, you are kind of required to take all different sorts of courses, and I just wanted to be the best student I could be in each of those. And so I wasn't really thinking about what specific thing I wanted to focus on. And that kind of came more in when I got to university.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll probably talk a little bit more about that. So yeah, kind of getting into my high school activities that prepared me. Again, I didn't know that this is what I was shooting for. So I didn't really do any specific activities that seemed like a good fit for public policy specifically. But I think that any sort of involvement in any extracurricular clubs, extracurricular just means outside of the classroom, especially in a leadership position, looks really good in terms of the skills that you need to be a public policy major. So some of the activities that I did mock trial. This is mock trial is kind of what it sounds like. It's like a fake courtroom experience. And so I got to pretend to be a lawyer for a little bit, which was fun. So this is a picture of me preparing for our case. Model United Nations is similar, except instead of in a courtroom being a lawyer, you're pretending to be a delegate in the United Nations. I was also really involved in my Jewish youth group. So I was one of the board members there. This is a picture of us at one of the events. And I think, again, that's just an example of taking on a leadership role. And I think being a part of the Jewish youth group is what made me more interested in current events and social issues, because that's a lot of what we focused on. And then also I did a lot of volunteering. I don't think you necessarily have to, but I think it shows, again, that you like care about the world and other people. You like working with other people. So this is one camp for children with physical disabilities that I volunteered at regularly. And then the last thing that is more kind of school related is I was really fortunate that my high school offered a space for us to pursue independent academic interests and do our own like mini research projects. We called it a thesis, but having completed a thesis at university, it was not at all similar to that. But I did have to kind of come up with my own research paper in my own time, not connected to a class, and then presented on that to the whole school, which I think was just a really good experience for me to, kind of stand up in front of everyone and talk, which I was certainly not comfortable with. So I think any kinds of opportunities that you can do either with your high school or just with the community outside of school to develop some independent projects, I think shows good initiative and looks good for any sort of college application.
That is really cool, having the opportunity to do independent research. I can imagine that looked amazing on your college application. And you guys, I know that Czech high schools sometimes offer these opportunities, sometimes they don't, but don't worry, you can always reach out to me and I'm happy to kind of suggest other activities you can get involved in and that would boost your application, or I'll get you in touch with Rachel and she'll suggest something because she now knows how Czech high schools work and what are the opportunities there. So it's not that, you look at this and you're like, okay, we don't have any mock trials, we don't have any United Nations model and anything, or you don't know about a volunteering opportunity, but there are places where you can get this experience. And if you cannot find it on your own, please let me know and I'm happy to help you out with that.
Yes, definitely. I was just about to talk about how I know that all these activities I just talked about probably sound a bit unfamiliar to you. And universities in the US will absolutely recognize that there are different opportunities at Czech schools versus American schools. But working in gymnasium here, I kind of see more of what is available to you. And I know there are still opportunities that you can kind of talk about and shine through in your application. So I would say if your school does have a student parliament, that's a good thing to get involved in. If your school offers an Erasmus Plus program, I know some of my students just got back from a trip to Brussels with Erasmus, which seems really exciting. Especially because you're applying to schools in the US, if there's any sort of English club or seminar to kind of show that you are particularly interested in studying English, that would be really great. But I would say just doing anything that shows that you have interests outside of school really absolutely anything will look great on a college application. So definitely don't worry. They are not expecting you to be like a professional and know exactly what you want to do and have all these experiences focused on this one thing. I think it's great to show, especially for a public policy major that's so kind of general. It's great to show that you just have general interests and have the time management to do multiple things. So I would say sports, playing a musical instrument, like those things really look great. So yeah.
Well-rounded people. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I think US universities really focus on they always talk about the holistic application and considering everything. So yeah. Okay, so now getting into picking a college. This was a really tough process for me. Again, I'm super indecisive. So, I was undecided about my major when applying to schools, and in almost all of my applications, I applied as an undecided major instead of declaring any major. So I really looked for schools that had a range of options and some flexibility in terms of when you had to declare your major. I was looking at schools that have a lot of interdisciplinary programs. That's a big word, but it basically just means that certain ways, certain classes or majors or minors that combine different fields of study, since that's what I was kind of interested in. It's often called a liberal arts education, which is kind of just this like giving you a general education rather than focusing on there are some schools that are specifically technical schools and or usually bigger state universities where you have to go in with a major and just study that major. Whereas liberal arts schools generally have I can't think of the word now, but basically you have to take a few classes in every department. I think they were called just maybe departmental requirements. So yeah, you have to get that general education no matter what your major is.
And this is really cool. And you guys, if you need to know more or would you like to know more about liberal arts education, we did like 3 webinars about that in November 2023. You can definitely find it on our YouTube channel. And not only we explain what liberal arts is and kind of compared it to what you might know from the Czech Republic, I also did a webinar with a girl with a Czech student who went to the US, and she started off at Connecticut College, which is a small liberal art college in Connecticut. And then she went on for her grad studies to Harvard. And she compares her experience. And, this might give you an idea on, what is the biggest difference between liberal arts and then this huge institution such as Harvard. So I definitely recommend you watching those videos because liberal arts is something we do not really offer in the Czech Republic. Here, as you know, you have to pick and choose very early on, and it is a pain if you change your mind. Whereas in the United States, it is quite common, and you can hear it throughout these series, when students talk about their experience, how they changed their mind 4 times, like this could never happen here. So if you know that you would like to pick and choose and try and take this course and that course, this is very good option for you. So thank you, Rachel.
Yes, exactly. I can't even count how many times I changed my mind because I ended up attending Princeton University, and I'll talk about that in a second, but you didn't have to declare your major until the end of your sophomore year. So you basically have 2 whole years to figure it out. And so I changed my mind a million times between the beginning and when I had to declare. And I didn't even have to, it didn't even feel like it wasn't a big deal to change because I never had to tell anybody about it. I didn't have to declare or do any sort of official form for my major until 2 years into my studies. So yeah, it really is nice that there's like no pressure at all to pick before then. And I think what's nice about the liberal arts education is that it kind of levels the playing field because everybody is required to take courses in all different subject areas. So, everybody is going to be taking a little bit of everything. It's not, you won't feel like a mess if you're taking random classes because that's what everyone's doing. So I thought that was really appealing. And taking these things into consideration, I ended up picking Princeton for my undergraduate studies. I really loved, I thought Princeton was really appealing for lots of different reasons. First of all, the campus is gorgeous. So I wanted to throw in some pictures of the beautiful architecture. But I think the biggest asset to Princeton compared to other similar universities like Harvard or Yale or Stanford is that Princeton really focuses on undergraduate students, which is students pursuing the bachelor's degree, because they actually don't even offer any, or they don't offer very many pre-professional degrees or master's degrees. There's no law school, there's no med school, there's no business school. So all the professors who are teaching at Princeton are really there to teach undergraduate students. Whereas I think at most other big fancy research institutions, they are there so that they can do their own research with PhD students or with the law school or the med school. And it's kind of, they're distracted by other things. Whereas at Princeton, they really focus on the undergraduates. And I definitely could feel that. I developed such close relationships with my professors who are experts in their field, and they are there because they're just really excited to teach college students.
And so does it mean that if you want to then continue for your master's, do students stay at Yale or do they usually switch to a different school for their master's?
Yeah, that's a good question. They usually switch. It depends on what master's you want. If you just want to get for example, public policy, Princeton does have a great, so yeah, that was kind of my next point, has a really great public policy school that is how I found out about this major existing in the first place. And you can definitely continue on to get your master's in public policy at Princeton. You can also get a master's, I think we have really great aerospace engineering, lots of different specific engineering degrees. Every department does have a few master's students, but we don't have the professional school. So again, business, med school, or law school.
Okay.
So if you want to, I think I want to go to law school eventually. And I'll definitely be applying to other schools because Princeton doesn't even offer it. So
okay, cool.
But as I mentioned, they do have a very unique public policy major. I don't even think I think a lot of schools have similar majors, so political science or maybe even public policy, but Princeton's school it's just kind of their own invention. It's called the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But so again, I went in, I didn't even know public policy was a thing when I started at Princeton, and I ended up just liking the policy classes I was taking, and I realized that would again probably be a good fit for me because I was interested in lots of different things. So yeah, I think no matter where you go to school, lots of schools have their own kind of unique major. So it might not fit exactly into what you were expecting, but it might be even better than you expected, which is how it turned out for me. I did want to mention some other schools that I was considering and that have really great public policy-esque, things related to public policy programs. So I will say I applied to a ton of schools. Like 16 schools, and it was a big, lots of work, really big process. But these are, just some of the options. You can't really go wrong. I think the like best equivalent to Princeton's public policy school is the Harvard Kennedy School.
Mhm.
That's more focused on government specifically.
Mhm.
But it's kind of a related field, and they also have a lot of experts in the
Mhm.
field there. So Harvard is obviously in Boston. Dartmouth is in New Hampshire. I really loved Dartmouth. It's just a beautiful, like a smaller school, which I think is nice too.
Mhm.
Stanford is in California. Duke is in North Carolina. Northwestern is in Chicago.
Mhm.
Brown is in Rhode Island. Michigan is obviously in Michigan. Rice is in Texas somewhere, I think. And Pomona College is in Southern California. That's another really small school.
Mhm.
But very small, like 2,000 students, I think.
Mhm.
But I really loved it when I visited, and I think they are, very focused on like international
Mhm.
affairs.
Mhm.
So these are all just great options to consider if you're thinking about public policy.
For you guys, those are amazing schools, but check out if they offer scholarship for international students, because as we all know, it can get very expensive. So check out if they have any either need-based or merit-based scholarship. Maybe, some of them I can imagine having sports scholarship, for athletes. So if you don't know where to find that information, please let me know. I'm happy to look that up for you. But yes, this will be a
Yeah.
big question in your school research, like looking for definitely the acceptance rate so that you have some dream schools, some target schools, and some safety schools. And also the financial aspect is very important.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was gonna say, I meant to mention that I think a lot of these schools offer great athletic scholarships.
Mhm.
And I think maybe because aside from Duke and Stanford and Michigan, I think all have really like high level athletic programs.
Mhm.
The rest are probably more attainable, like for just, for even for athletic scholarships, I think.
Mhm.
Um, and the other thing I wanted to say about Princeton is that we have really incredible financial aid. That it's completely need based, but they are so there's no merit based scholarships, but they are committed to meeting all of students' needs. So they don't look at your finances when they decide whether like who to accept, and then of accepted students, if someone can't pay full tuition, they are committed to paying whatever, to matching whatever the
Mhm.
students are unable to pay for. I know for international students, it's slightly different, but I think it's also one of the best like
Mhm.
financial aid programs. Princeton is really proud of that. So
That's really
yeah.
great. And there are Czech students at Princeton who went through Education USA. So if you would like to connect with them, I'm happy to share their contact info, and you can reach out and you can see how they're doing, because, the international perspective can be different from Rachel's perspective, so definitely gather as many information as you can. And the fact that Rachel mentioned was a need blind, school. So Princeton is need blind if you research it, meaning that they'll look uh, at your application and they'll be like, oh, we love you, and they're not going to look at your financial need. Whereas there are need aware schools, and they're going to look at your application as well as your financial aid. And they're going to be like, oh, we love you, but you cost a lot of money, so we are not sure if we can afford you. So it is, again, a very cool aspect to look for if the school is need blind or need aware. Okay, good.
Definitely, yeah. Okay, so kind of going back into the public policy specifics. So as I mentioned, the full title of the major is the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs, which is a very long, fancy name. The acronym we now call it is SPIA. That's just what it spells out. And as you can tell from the name, it focuses on both domestic and international policy. So that means in the US and all over the world. And students can kind of pick which of those realms they want to focus on more. Some students just take international policy classes, and some just take US policy classes, and some take a combination. So I think, and yeah, it's just really incredible, really interesting classes to choose from. You have some prerequisites, which means classes you have to take before you can declare the major. Some core classes, which means classes that everyone has to take in the major, and then some electives, which means kind of classes that you can just take out of interest, but they have to fall into, you know, the general realm of the major. But because public policy is so broad, you can make an argument for almost any class to fall under the public policy field. So that I always had so much fun with that. Like there are so many incredible classes to choose from. And even if they're like only slightly related to public policy or any of the kind of fields I described at the beginning, you can make it work. And then Princeton is known for this very unique part of our education, which is the independent work, which means you have to take on these research projects outside of class, and it's required for every single student to do junior projects and a senior thesis. And I will talk about that a little bit more in a second. But first, I just wanted to kind of touch on the general prerequisites and core classes. So basically the classes you have to take. I want to clarify, it's not like one specific class that everyone has to take. It's you have to take one class that is a statistics class, and they have a few different options of what can fit into that. So it's really nice that there's a lot of flexibility. You can kind of fit it into, if you've never taken statistics before, you can take just kind of a general political statistics class. If you are great at math and really love statistics, you can take a much higher level statistics class, and those can both fall under that kind of core requirement. And the same applies for the rest. But yeah, it's kind of general statistics, which means like data science, doing quantitative research mostly. So using some sort of programs. We use the program called R or R Studio. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. People can use Stata or Python, but you learn how to do some sorts of computer programs that are really, really helpful life skills. So I was super intimidated by that. I'm terrible at technology. I thought it was going to be a disaster, and it actually ended up being one of my favorite classes. So don't underestimate yourself. No one knows what they're doing going into it. So it's kind of exciting to try out. You have to take microeconomics, which is just economics. I don't really know what macroeconomics is. Microeconomics is, I guess, more of the individual person to person economic situations. You have to take politics, history, psychology or sociology. So again, there's that flexibility there. A science policy class, which is where I said, I mentioned you can really fit in other interests that seem unrelated. So I ended up taking an epidemiology class, which is about like infectious diseases, and ethics. So that's more of the philosophical side of things. So again, you'll come out a really well-rounded student, and I really loved
Wow, but it's amazing. Did you only make like did you have one major public policy or did you also have some minors? Because this kind of touches on,
A
so
lot.
many,
Yeah.
yeah. And I believe that, you guys, if you were interested in studying public policy, but then you took some really interesting history classes, is there an opportunity to kind of like decide to have a history as a minor because you already took some classes anyway?
Yes.
Hmm.
This is a complicated question because it has just changed for the better, I think. When I was there we didn't have minors. We had these things called concentrations
Hmm.
or concentration was our word for major. Sorry, it's very confusing. And certificates was our version of minors. And it's a little bit more intense than a minor. Its certificates were only interdisciplinary programs. So it wasn't, you couldn't just get a minor in history. It was a certificate in history and diplomacy. And it was like a kind of specific thing you had to take. It felt more like a major. It had more specific requirements. It was less flexible. And it made it a lot harder for people, I think, to get, you know, even though it would make sense to do that. You have to sacrifice some classes that you want to take for interest to fit in the required classes for those certificates. So I actually didn't end up, I was almost got the certificate in history and the practice of diplomacy and in global health policy, because those were the two focuses I really did kind of within public policy. I loved the history classes and I really loved health policy classes. But I was like one class away from doing those and I wanted to take a fun class instead. And I don't regret that decision at all. I would recommend that to anybody. But the positive is that Princeton has recently changed. We do still have the certificate programs, but you can also just get a regular minor in history or politics or English. And I think it's a bit more attainable. So I wish I
What
had
was the fun class you took? What was the
the
fun
fun class.
class?
It was British cinema. So it was like
Oh,
films, and specifically British films, and I absolutely loved it.
awesome. Okay, it was worth it.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Great question. Um, yes. Okay. So my academic experience. As you can tell, you can take the super wide range of courses, anything relating to public policy and all sorts of issue areas. Really anything you can imagine. My favorite classes were women and law in U.S. history. Again, I love history and I'm definitely interested in gender studies and the law. I also really loved, again, health policy. So we talked about the Affordable Care Act, which is a very specific health policy in the U.S. So I kind of focused more on U.S. policies, but there are incredible international policy classes. One of my other favorite history classes was about the Soviet Empire. And that was one of the things that kind of encouraged me to come to the Czech Republic in the first place. So, yes. And then I also wanted to throw in there quantitative analysis, which is basically the statistics class I was talking about on the last slide. Because I was shocked by how much I liked the statistics. That seemed really intimidating. So
I would also be shocked, like
yeah.
so. Yeah.
And in most of the classes that are specific policy classes, so not like the history or other like related fields, you are encouraged to come up with your own policy recommendations for certain government entities. So you get a lot of like practical kind of real world practice that I think is really interesting and that I didn't really had no idea or understanding of how that worked going into university. So that was really fun. Yeah, and then getting into the independent research. So as I mentioned, this is a requirement for everyone at Princeton. but it's not as intimidating, again, as it seems.
Mm.
You're kind of, they prepare you as you go along to do this independent research before your junior year. And then you're paired with a faculty advisor, a professor who really like helps you throughout all stages of the process. It's different for every major. So it's kind of hard. It's just different for every major, but for public policy and a lot of the similar ones, so history or politics, economics, you write one or two papers your junior year, and then one much longer one your senior year.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have a seminar or a class where that you have dedicated time to look into your independent research topic, and sometimes you have to do it, completely on your own time.
Mm-hmm.
But they acknowledge that you take fewer classes those semesters if you're doing your independent research. And it's a really exciting opportunity. It's like anything that you're interested in. You get to read what other people have studied about it, and you have to kind of find a question that hasn't been answered yet, and then you figure out a way to try to answer that question. Obviously, we're not experts. We don't know what we're doing, but that's why you have the professor to advise you. And yeah, it's really great. It's very demanding, but it's really great experience, especially for kind of anything you do after college. So my junior year, I had to write two of the papers. So it was right after COVID. So I studied domestic violence, the increase in domestic violence during COVID, and public opinion and people's just general knowledge about the abortion procedure. And then my senior year, my big senior thesis was studying the role of doctors and medical professionals in abortion cases in the Supreme Court, which is like the federal court in the US. And you can see that book that I'm holding in that picture. That's my senior thesis. So you put a lot of work into it, but then you get this big fancy book, and it's cool that you get to say that you wrote a book by the end of your senior year. And in SPIA, the public policy major, the bottom picture is a picture of the SPIA building, and we have this beautiful fountain in front of the building. And so when everyone submits their senior thesis, there's a big celebration and everyone runs into the fountain. And it's just like a really great time to kind of let out all the steam and celebrate. So that's a picture of that.
That's amazing. That really resembles to the Czech system where you have to write a paper that's pretty long, at the end of your bachelor and master's degree. However, with ChatGPT, and I have to say with AI in general, they are really reconsidering this because students get a lot of help from these sources, and they don't see it meaningful anymore. So we'll see how this goes, even at Princeton, because I spent a lot of time writing my bachelor and master's thesis, and it was not the favorite part of my studies. I have to say, like rewriting what other people said, and quoting and stuff. And then I got this big shiny book, as you said, and now it's sitting on my shelf and nobody will ever read it again, So we will see how this goes. I personally did not enjoy writing papers. I much more enjoy sitting in the class and having the conversations and being able to see how this impacts the real world. So guys, don't get kind of like scared by having to write 3 papers throughout your studies at Princeton. You'll see how, like we are all going forward with technology. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Also, the important thing to say is that this is a very Princeton specific experience. And Princeton is actually the only school in the US that requires this. I know that it's kind of comforting to me that it's also required at most Czech schools, because I always felt I was always so annoyed that my friends at other schools in the US didn't have to do this, and I did, and it was kind of a traumatizing experience, I would say. Like, I came out stronger, but it was really difficult. So I would say any other school you're thinking about, even with a public policy major, you wouldn't have to do this. Just something to consider about Princeton. So
thank you.
Yeah. But I did absolutely love my time at Princeton. So here are just a few pictures of what it's like to be just any Princeton student. The first picture is a picture of our dorms. This isn't my dorm. This is just one I found. It's a good example. I think they're pretty nice. Some of the buildings are pretty old. It's hard to show like one Princeton dorm, because I think something I love about the Princeton campus is that we have all different types of buildings. The architecture is very varied. So I think you could have a completely different dorm experience depending on where you're placed. And they randomly place you in a dorm your freshman year. So, and that's something I really liked, because you get to know new people. And I came in not knowing anybody, so it was nice for me. The beautiful picture next to it is my dorm my senior year, so this past year. I absolutely loved it. And in the spring, they have these cherry blossom trees that are beautiful. Next to that is a picture of me and my friends. I made great friends. The people at Princeton are amazing. Yes, just like the best people you'll meet in the world. But this is another unique part of the Princeton experience, is that our social life is kind of based around these things called eating clubs. We don't have Greek life. We don't have fraternities or sororities. Eating clubs, it sounds really nice. You just go there and you eat. So
Exactly. Count me in.
So it's basically when you're an upperclassman, so a junior and senior, your last 2 years of college. You, instead of going to the dining hall, you eat your meals at these eating clubs, which are just like kind of big houses. So that's a picture of my friends and I standing in front of our eating club. But the picture below it is the more typical like on-campus dining hall. And so that's where you eat your first 2 years. And everyone always says that it kind of looks like Hogwarts, like from Harry Potter. It's yeah, really beautiful building. So it's a nice place to eat.
It also looks like a library, you know, like it doesn't look like a school canteen or anything.
Oh yeah, you're right. People do work while they're eating. That's another thing about Princeton, is that everyone is working all the time. But during more busy times, you'll see people actually eating.
Okay.
And then, yeah, it snows sometimes, which is nice.
I think it's snow days. That's amazing. And that's unique, you know, you don't get that in the Czech Republic. So
yeah, exactly. And I was coming from the South, I was not used to snow at all. So that was really exciting for me. But the snow here is much prettier, I think. But yeah, I would say there's like so much to say about student life at Princeton, but the bottom line is I really loved it. I think it's a great community. There's always lots of things to do, opportunities to meet really great people. So yeah. And I also want to talk a little bit about more like official extracurricular activities or organizations I did. I was really involved in it was called the Pace Center for Civic Engagement, but it was basically just like service organization, so volunteering. Because again, I said I did a lot of that in high school, so that's something I wanted to continue in college. I also worked on the Daily Princetonian, which is our newspaper, our student newspaper. This orange key at the bottom is the symbol for the Orange Key organization, which is the group of campus tour guides. So I gave tours around campus. So that's why I do have a lot to say about the different fun facts about Princeton. And if you have any specific questions about that, you can reach out to me. And then one of the biggest parts of my extracurricular experience is I walked onto the crew team. So crew is like rowing a boat. And they it's a varsity sport. One of the Princeton teams are like the best in the country. It's really intense.
Are they really, or are you just biased?
I am the funny part is that I'm absolutely terrible at crew. Like my friends were amazing. I had never even heard of the sport before. I hate any sort of like, it's very cardio heavy because and I really hate cardio, but I just, missed having something to do in my free time, and I joined the team as a freshman. It's very intense. So I did it for about a year and a half, and then I stopped because I wanted to focus more on classes and things that I probably enjoyed more. But it was a really great experience and a great way to meet people. And I wanted to mention this because I wanted to say that sports can be really easily accessible. At different levels. Like if you want to play, you can walk onto the varsity sports team. So even if you're not a recruited athlete, walking on just means that you join the team as a regular student. You're anytime throughout your experience. So yeah, you can walk on, or you can do club sports, which are like a bit less intense. Or intramural sports, which are even less intense. So lots of options for sports, which I know is a big thing here in the Czech Republic. So I wanted to mention that. Yes, and then last thing to talk about is what happens after you study public policy. So because it's such a general major, there are lots of different ways you can go after you graduate. I think the most common is going into government. So because that's where policies are being made. So that's kind of the most obvious route. A lot of people also go to law school, which is what I'm considering doing, because you do study a lot of laws, because laws are policies. So it's very related. Also, you can go into business and consulting. I know that there was another presentation that can explain more of this, because consulting especially is becoming very popular in the US and probably around the world. And it's a bit vague about what it actually is, but if you're more interested in the kind of economic, financial side of policies, then this is definitely a good route to go. Something that I think is really interesting for public policy graduates is being a policy analyst and maybe working at a think tank. So there are lots of this seems like it's kind of a made-up job. Like it's not something
a little bit.
It's not something you hear about, like, that really comes to mind as a real job, but it is real. There are lots of organizations that do research, and that's why if you do, a thesis or independent research in college, it's a great preparation for this, because they do all sorts of research and analyses into how effective policies are. And so yeah, they're usually like nonprofit organizations, so they don't make a profit, but they still do really important work. So yeah, you can also just do academic research, or you can go more into the political side of things and go into advocacy. So that would be like talking to politicians about specific issue areas you're really passionate about. So yeah, if people are really focused on climate change, there are lots of advocacy organizations focusing on talking to politicians about what environmental policies they should be implementing to help with climate change. So that's a great option. And then there are also international fellowships, which is what I'm doing this year. And it's a great option if you're still trying to figure out what you want to do after. So yeah, the US is it's nice because you really have lots of time to decide. Even after you pick a major, you still don't have to know what you're doing with your life after. So there are lots of ways to buy some time, change careers as you go through. And I think a public policy major really gives you that flexibility because it can be applied again to so many different fields. So you can try out advocacy and then decide you want to do more, hands-on or I don't know, more like, yeah, you can decide you want to go more into the business side of things. And then go back to research. Like you can go all over the place, and this one major will help you with that. So
I do love that it's a stepping stone to so many opportunities, even into the law school. Like you guys don't have to go through pre-law to then try a law school, so go get a public policy degree, and you touch on various subjects, and then you can continue to law school, or then you decide that law is not the way you want to go. So I love that, you can even go to business, and as Rachel mentioned, there is a separate presentation for business and economics and consulting. There is a special presentation about nonprofit organizations and how to work there. So look out for that. It's amazing that you will come out as a well-rounded student, as a well-rounded person. And if you have any questions, and if you would like to connect with Education USA or Rachel regarding Princeton, like she's not biased at all,
Yeah, clearly.
If you also think that Princeton is the best, I'm so happy to connect you with Rachel, and she can share more, and I'm sure that she would be able to connect you with other either international students or other people. She would be happy to tell you how she got the job as a school tour guide, because I think that this is such a great opportunity for you. So yeah, I'm so happy. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, as Hani said, definitely reach out to me if you have any questions related to anything I talked about. Here's my email. And for the rest of this school year, I'll be in Hanice. I love it here. So if you ever want to come visit, you can. And yeah.
That's very nice. So you guys either visit Rachel in Hranice or just send her an email, you don't have to travel all the way. But if you are there, it's a great way to meet a real American, and speak English and so forth. Otherwise, Education USA is available to you on our email address, which is advisor@fulbright.cz, or through social media. I am happy to go through the school selection with you, or if you already know the schools, let's look at the scholarship opportunities at your application. And then, we are here to help free of charge to everyone. So thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you so much for introducing public policy, because I think that it was not really clear to us. What does it mean? What should we be ready for? So thank you so much for explaining the courses, explaining our options. And you guys, if you have questions, please get in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.